Rebel Moon is about a young woman living on a desert planet, teaming up with an opportunist smuggler, an assassin with glowing red swords, an ex-general, and other rebels, as they fight against an all-powerful galactic empire who have far superior technology, a legion of troopers, and planet-destroying spaceships. Whereas Star Wars A New Hope from 1977 is about a young man living on a desert planet, teaming up with an opportunist smuggler, a man with a glowing blue lightsaber who is the next general of the Republic, and other rebels, as they fight against an all-powerful galactic empire who have far superior technology, a legion of stormtroopers, and a planet-destroying space station. Perhaps there are a few similarities between Zack Snyder's Netflix sci-fi movie and George Lucas's 1977 Star Wars film. Now admittedly, an uncountable number of films make homages to Star Wars. Its effects can be seen in pretty much every movie in a sci-fi genre over the last 50 years. And that's perfectly normal. Let's not forget that Star Wars borrowed a lot from Dune, Japanese samurai films, and Flash Gordon, with a heavy dose of dambusters for the Death Star trench run. But Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, took so many aspects, key and superficial, from not just A New Hope, but all Star Wars movies, that in my opinion, it steps way over the line of homage and tribute, and steps into the realm of a poorly done, derivative, copy and paste job, with such a lack of creativity that I'm surprised Lucasfilm didn't make a copyright claim against it. Rebel Moon is ChatGPT's answer to the question, how can I make a bad Star Wars fanfiction on a budget of over $100 million? Now, as fun as pointing out the countless Star Wars similarities / rip-offs Rebel Moon has, which I'll certainly be doing a lot of throughout the video, I wanted to focus on how Zack Snyder managed to copy all the wrong aspects of Star Wars and completely miss what makes Star Wars great. What Snyder did was the equivalent of watching a Victoria's Secret catwalk and trying to mimic it in a farmyard by putting a bra on a cow and knickers on a pig, and then thinking the cow and the pig look exactly like the models because they were wearing the same clothes. First, let's look at why the characters in Rebel Moon serve as inferior counterparts to those in Star Wars. The main character is called Kora, and she's a Luke/Rey carbon copy. She's probably more in the veins of Rey, as obviously they are both skinny, black-haired women who both overcome every challenge they face with relative ease. Aside from her appearance, the main reason that Kora, and the other characters for that matter, are rather bland, I would say, are for two main reasons: dialogue and chemistry. Now, Star Wars is not particularly known for its Shakespearean dialogue. Just ask Harrison Ford.
I said to George, you can type this stuff, but you can't say it.
But Rebel Moon's dialogue is so much worse, and it's so hard to relate to Kora when she answers every question posed to her with a 5-minute narration of what her life was like when she fought for the Imperium. For example, "Hi Kora, how are you? I was once a soldier for the Imperium when I had to destroy planets for my adoptive father. Oh, okay. Well, do you want some dinner? When I was a bodyguard to Princess Issa, I saw things I could never have imagined. She would have brought kindness and love back to the galaxy. The princess once believed that dinner would be the sign of a new dawn, a promise of better things to come, amidst all the sacrifices we have all made. Oh, I'll leave dinner in the oven then." I'm being facetious, of course, but the actual dialogue really wasn't far from this. With Gunnar, Kora's love interest, well, one of her love interests, did his best to have a normal conversation with her, but Snyder used Kora primarily as a world-building tool to fill in the history of the Rebel Moon universe. And this style of storytelling is really stop-starty, with flashbacks and repetitive exposition. It's just not good world building. It makes you think that the events the characters are flashing back to are far more interesting than the painstakingly slow conversations that are taking place in present day. Kora and Gunnar are supposed to have some form of romance between them, but it was so poorly handled that I imagine most people missed it, until Kai the Smuggler, the Han Solo copy, says to Gunnar, "You're in love with her, aren't you?" It's never good for a side character to almost have to wink at the audience and tell us that there is in fact a romance going on between the two main leads. we should be able to see this romance in their conversations together, and we should be able to feel it in the way they look and act with each other. Every conversation between Kora and Gunnar cuts to a flashback of Kora's old life, so we don't get to see these two characters interact. They're in conversation with each other on screen for about 3 minutes at most. It also doesn't help that Kora is sleeping with Den at the start of the film, and in one of her flashbacks she is, albeit briefly, kissing a fellow Imperium soldier, so she has romantic entanglements with two other characters beside Gunnar.
I got into a different kind of entanglement,
which kind of reduces the connection she has with Gunnar, as we've seen her romantically involved with two other characters already. Gunnar comes across as more of a sidekick to Kora than a love interest, and definitely not a charming heartthrob in the mould of Han Solo. Han and Leia had such great chemistry, not because they told each other about their past with long drawn-out dialogues. They have great chemistry because they are arguing about the Millennium Falcon being a pile of junk, or how selfish Han was, or how pompous Leia could be. They were doing what people attracted to each other do. They were quipping, grabbing hold of each other during gunfights, and quarrelling about the small things. The only moment of real flirtation Kora has is not with Gunnar, but with Kai. He jokes about Kora and the rest of the team needing him to join them so badly that he just might have to leave his roguish life behind and join her rebel cause. So if Snyder was trying to replicate the romance between Han and Leia with Kora and Gunnar, he failed miserably.
Afraid I was gonna leave without giving you a goodbye kiss?
I just assumed it's a Wookiee.
I can arrange that.
You could use a good kiss.
Moving on from the weak story of the two main leads, if we look at the other characters, we've got General Titus, who is apparently a tactical genius ex-Imperium general. And do we see any of this military insight during the movie? Not at all. He is initially introduced as a drunk, he gets hosed down, literally, shouted at by Kora, and then joins the rebels, and then just sits in the background, twiddling his thumbs. During a battle between Atticus Noble, his troopers, and Kora's group, Titus takes cover behind some barrels, and occasionally pops his head out to shoot at Noble's men. Does he gather the team and give commands? Does he give an inspirational speech? No. He is completely replaceable. He shows absolutely no military experience, apart from being able to shoot from cover. Regent Belisarius, when talking to Noble in the final sequence, calls General Titus a genius. Twice. Which is yet again another moment of telling the audience instead of showing the audience. While we're on Belisarius, he is an obvious Palpatine rip-off. A savvy political figure who takes over as leader of the Galactic Empire and grooms a young apprentice, who eventually betrays him. And I'll wager that just as Anakin dealt the killing blow to his master Palpatine, Kora will be the one to kill Belisarius. Anyway, back to Titus. Zack Snyder created a character with incredible battlefield intelligence, so much so that Copy and Paste Palpatine was very concerned that Titus had joined up with Kora's rebels. And yet, we see no evidence of this great tactical mind that apparently Titus possesses. The rest of the characters fall into one-note cliches, with each member of Kora's rebel group being defined by their tragic past. It's almost like they are trying to one-up each other with who has the most heartbreaking life story. Asajj Ventress, Nemesis, tells us about how she lost her children to the Motherworld. Tarek, we find out, was the prince of a Motherworld-destroyed planet, and likewise, Kai was from a planet that suffered the same fate, being totally destroyed by Motherworld forces, and every man under Titus's command was killed by the Motherworld. The antagonist of the film, Atticus Noble, is a Wish version of Darth Vader, a mechanically augmented Imperium leader sent to do his master's bidding, who at the end of the movie is picked up and revived by advanced technology in a similar way to how Anakin was fitted with the Vader suit at the end of Revenge of the Sith. So character-wise, Rebel Moon has the archetypal Star Wars characters: the Rebel, the Galactic Dictator, the Adopted Princess, the war-weary General, and the charming Smuggler. But unlike those in Star Wars, Rebel Moon's characters are nothing more than her archetypes. They have no memorable dialogue, no signature qualities, no interesting outfits, no cool weaponry. They are just boring and unoriginal. Now, Rebel Moon cost a heck of a lot more than A New Hope, and in terms of visuals, especially the planet hopping that takes place, is more similar to the prequels, where we visit numerous planets per film. But unlike the prequels, the planets are so unimaginative and uninspiring. They are either desert or agricultural planets, like Pollux and Velt, or just gloomy looking planets with advanced civilizations, like Gondoval and a mining planet Dagus. I mean, just look at these images. How boring are these planets? The only real perceivable difference between them is that they are different shades of black, brown and dark grey. Contrast this with the green luscious forest of Endor and Kashyyyk, the swamps of Dagobah, Cloud City on Bespin, Camino with the partially submerged cloning facility, and the fiery rivers of Mustafar. Every planet in Star Wars has a completely different look, different creatures and different inhabitants, whereas Rebel Moon has interchangeable planets and the occasional attention-grabbing alien, but none as interesting as a Wookiee, Geonosian or Mon Calamari.
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 47. It's a trap!
Rebel Moon, when compared to Star Wars, also suffers in scale. In another, let's say tribute to A New Hope, we start the film off with a slow sweeping shot of the Imperial cruiser. But unlike in A New Hope, where we see the Empire's Star Destroyer as it dwarfs a rebel ship, showing just how mighty and powerful the Empire are, for the introduction of the King's Gaze in Rebel Moon, well, it just sort of appears. And it looks big, but in comparison to what? And at the end of Rebel Moon, the shipyard battle seems tame, compared to the guns to the wall ending of A New Hope. Instead of the rebels facing off against the Death Star, fighting off TIE fighters and turrets by the dozen, in Rebel Moon, there's one big ship and a few small ships, and eventually the big ship slowly falls down into what seems like a local spaceport. Talking of the ships in Rebel Moon, they all look the same, futuristic looking black and grey spaceships, all generically shaped, none of which hold a candle to the different designs of X-Wings, TIE Fighters, the Millennium Falcon or Star Destroyers. Oh, and I've got to mention the slow motion. Zack Snyder is known for being one of those rare directors who has a distinct style, but to me, 90% of this style is an overly excessive use of slow-mo. I don't think there was one fight sequence that didn't involve Kora running towards the enemy in super slow motion. It dragged the pace of the fights down so much that it reminded me of one of those interactive cutscenes in video games, and then you have to press a button within a certain window of time for your character to make the right move. This slow-mo approach narrowed the fight scenes, as the camera was solely focused on Kora the entire 10-second shot. It took away any tension and padded out the duration of the fights unnecessarily. In contrast, George Lucas's approach to battles was to have lots of running, shouting, and pulpy fast-paced action, mixed with dramatic tense ship battles.
Have you not?
And I think this will be a good point to summarise why Rebel Moon is a superficial Star Wars rip-off without any of the charm, substance, or dramatic moments that Star Wars is so famous for. Yes, you can replicate the look of Star Wars, rip off the characters, take the first half of A New Hope and the second half of Seven Samurai, but without the chemistry between Leia and Han and the charisma of Harrison Ford, Kai is just a smuggler and Kora is just a boring character. Without any creative design work and rusty Millennium Falcon charm, Kora's ship is just a ship. Without the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker's backstory, Atticus Noble is just a dog's body. And without any character building, Nemesis is just a woman holding two knockoff lightsabers. Now you could perhaps say that all these comparisons to Star Wars are unfair, as Star Wars is such an iconic franchise which has set an impossibly high bar for sci-fi films to reach. But I would argue that in all the publicity for Rebel Moon from Snyder and Netflix, they went out of their way to mention Star Wars and compare their movie to the galaxy far, far away at every opportunity. The Star Wars piggybacking PR, combined with the fact that it really does replicate so many aspects from Star Wars, I think makes the comparisons totally fair, and Snyder and Netflix should have expected them. Rebel Moon didn't fail because it was too similar to Star Wars, but because it wasn't anything like Star Wars, beyond a superficial coating. Rebel Moon is a soulless clash of a collection of films and cliches that came before it. It really is a personification of the saying, you may imitate style, but you can't imitate creativity. Now I'd like to know, what do you think? Am I being too harsh in comparing it to Star Wars, and did you in fact enjoy the film? If you enjoyed this video, then perhaps consider subscribing to the channel. I release videos every week on the best films and shows around, as well as video essays like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you again.